Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching America 360 on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will meet US President Donald Trump later this month and claims the second phase of Washington's Gaza peace plan is close. He says the talks will focus on ending Hamas rule and advancing peace as negotiations continue on hostage release and a possible interim Palestinian government. A magnitude 7 earthquake has struck near Yucatan in Alaska, according to the US Geological Survey. The quake hit at a depth of 10 kilometers with no immediate reports of damage or casualties. Russia's Dmitry Medvedev says the new US national security strategy shows Washington is ready to discuss a broader security architecture. He says Moscow will study these signals but warns any talks must address Russia's core strategic concerns. Outgoing US envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, says a deal to end the Ukraine war is really close and remaining issues include Ukraine's Donbass region and one of Ukraine's main nuclear plants. He also claims that both sides have suffered 2 million casualties during the near 4-year war. US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth says he fully supports the decision to launch a second strike on a suspected drug boat in the Caribbean. He says he would have made the same call himself as questions grow over reports that 2 survivors were targeted in the follow-up attack. The US National Park Service says it will drop Martin Luther King Jr. Day and Juneteenth from its list of free entrance days as part of President Trump's new modernization plan. The agency will add Flag Day as a patriotic free entry date, while only US citizens will qualify for it. Police in North Carolina charge a 33-year-old man with attempted murder after a rider is stabbed on a Charlotte commuter train. Officers say the suspect, who was previously deported, used a large knife and the victim remains in critical but in stable condition. Japan says Chinese fighter jets locked their radar on Japanese military aircraft in 2 dangerous incidents near Okinawa, calling the action extremely regrettable. Tokyo has lodged a formal protest while Beijing disputes the account as regional tensions rise over Taiwan and military drills. Those are the headlines for the hour. We move into our top story. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, while addressing a joint press conference with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in Jerusalem today, has said that he will be meeting with US President Donald Trump later this month and hold further discussions on initiating the second phase of the Gaza peace plan. Let's take a listen in to the Israeli Prime Minister's statements.
And we discuss, of course, how to bring an end to the Hamas rule in Gaza, because that's an essential part of ensuring a different future for Gaza and a different future for us facing Gaza. So now opportunities for peace are there. We tend to exploit them. I'm going to discuss them with President Trump when I meet him later on this month.
Meanwhile, speaking at the presser alongside the Israeli Prime Minister, the German Chancellor has said that both countries are collectively working towards, quote, a new Middle East, where Israel gets its due recognition. Moreover, he has stressed that the 2-state plan is possibly the best solution for both Palestine and Israel's future, and that this solution can only be achieved through peaceful negotiations. Let's listen in to what he said on the matter.
Das Vorgehen der israelischen Regierung auch in ein gewisses Dilemma geführt. Deutschland muss für Israels Sicherheit einstehen. Und Deutschland muss für Menschenwürde und Recht einstehen, die den Kern unserer Verfassung, gerade nach Shoah und Weltkrieg, ausmachen. Als Land im Krieg, als demokratischer Rechtsstaat musste sich Israel in seinem militärischen Vorgehen eben auch am Völkerrecht messen lassen.
We're now joined by Keith Vaz. He is a former British minister and he joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Keith. It's always a pleasure to talk to you here on the programme. Of course, Netanyahu, a huge bilateral meeting today, but Netanyahu announces a huge meeting with Donald Trump during this month. We don't know when, we don't know the location. However, what hangs in the balance is the fragility of this ceasefire and the possible fruition into a second phase. Now, the Qatari Prime Minister said that today that these negotiations are at a breaking point. Netanyahu announces this meeting now. How crucial is it, given Western condemnation of course, the conduct of Israel in Gaza, for Israel, that this peace deal does move forward with the US president?
Good afternoon, Thomas from London. We don't know when the phases are supposed to start. This is the problem. Unfortunately, it's all become very muddled. What was phase one, apart from the handover of the hostages and the release of the prisoners? And what is phase two? The problem for the other states, apart from America and Israel, who presumably know what phase one and phase two is what are we talking about here? It sounds like a very carefully monitored progress, but what is involved? There we have the German Chancellor talking about the possibility of a two-state solution. I think it's been established, hasn't it, that there's got to be a two-state solution. It is UN policy. So these nuances that come out of these press conferences are not very helpful. The other problem, of course, is that there's no one speaking on behalf of the Palestinians because nobody will deal with Hamas because they have been branded as a terrorist organization. So you're dealing at the moment only with one side. And I think it's important that we try and resolve exactly what these phases involve. Having a meeting with Donald Trump is very helpful, of course, but it does take two to tango. You do need the other side to be present if you're going to get any kind of solution to the problem that is still with the Middle East. And as we know from the international reports, Thomas, there are continued to be Israeli offensives against the Palestinians. This is going on. It's an ongoing issue, and we sometimes get to learn about it, but sometimes we don't. So, is that still continuing? Oh, everyone else seems to think it is continuing, except the Israeli government, who seem to think that there is peace in the Middle East at the moment. And of course there isn't, because the people of Palestine are still suffering greatly. So the fact that they're meeting again later in the month is presumably because they need to clarify more information from the United States. I think what President Trump has done is he has, in effect, slowed down the Israeli aggression, but we don't know whether it's enough to satisfy other countries and indeed the people of Palestine.
We have heard of rumoured spats between the US president and the Israeli Prime Minister. However, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu gave that big speech at the United Nations. Then the week after, he was announcing this peace deal. Of course, this meeting with Donald Trump might hopefully move this forward. And also we've seen international condemnation, particularly, of course, from Western allies, toned down once this peace deal has been announced. How important is it for both, of course, the US president's credibility and the alliances that Israel has with its Western partners, mainly, that this deal moves forward?
Well, it's vital that it moves forward because we are not going to get peace in the Middle East unless this happens pretty rapidly, until you guarantee the existence of a two-state solution. How can you have a phase two when Israel itself will not accept that there should be a Palestinian state? the rest of the world believes there should be. But if Israel doesn't accept it, how on earth are you going to get to the end of phase 2? And if you get to the end of phase 2, what is phase 3? I mean, we've had different scenarios as to what's going to happen there, including the building of a Trump Tower and a Riviera on the Palestinian coast, in the coast of the Gaza Strip. I mean, is that phase 3? What is phase 3? When did we announce that phase 1 is over? So they will have a lot to talk about. But there is no point in having a one-to-one discussion with the President of the United States if the other countries are not involved. You will remember, Thomas, only a few weeks ago, there was a signing of an agreement in Cairo, and President Macron was there, Keir Starmer was there, Giorgia Meloni was there from Italy. All these other leaders all turned up. I mean, I think 30 leaders turned up. Where are they now? Are they going to be involved in phase 2? Was that the beginning of phase 1? I think we're kind of losing the narrative here as to exactly where we are. And people tend to be making this up as you go along. That's the problem with diplomacy being written on the back of an envelope. It has to be a process that is understood and followed by America, Israel, and the people of Palestine, together with the rest of the world. It's a world problem. It's not just an Israeli and USA problem. The whole world came to the signing of that agreement. I think with one or two exceptions. South Africa may not have been there. And obviously Russia was not there because they wouldn't let Russia in. So if they're not there, China was not there, but everyone else was there. So are they all going to be invited to this meeting at the White House? Who knows? Maybe they are.
Keith Vaz, as always, it's a great pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much for joining us. We now move on over to Moscow, and Russia has welcomed a shift in tone in the new US national security strategy, calling it a possible opening for dialogue. The Russian Security Council Deputy Chairman Dmitry Medvedev says the updated strategy signals US readiness to discuss global security architecture. Medvedev noted that for the first time in many years, the US document no longer labels Russia as a direct threat. Instead, it refers to Moscow as a participant in dialogue on strategy favors discussion over constant sanctions, even though new restrictions on Russian oil remain in place. Medvedev also pointed out that the updated strategy includes a clause on halting NATO expansion and that Ukraine is not mentioned in this context. At the same time, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov called the shift a positive step. He added that the US approach under President Donald Trump marks a shift from previous administrations and offers a chance for cooperation, particularly in the area of strategic stability. Okay, we are talking about Russia welcoming a new shift in tone in the new US national security strategy. The Kremlin has called it an opening for dialogue. The Russian Security Council Deputy Chairman Dmitry Medvedev says the updated strategy signals US readiness to discuss global security architecture. Medvedev, of course, noted that for the first time in many years, the United States document no longer labels Russia as a direct security threat, of course, in complete contrast to the Biden administration, a staunch supporter of Kyiv. Donald Trump, however, did put sanctions, the first sanctions of his presidency, just a couple of months ago on two large crude oil companies coming out of Moscow after Vladimir Putin's Russia once again and again denied ceasefire deals. Of course, we'll see how this moves forwards, but this goes to show Donald Trump and his flip-flopping strategy towards the Ukraine war and, of course, his warmth towards Vladimir Putin, who he met in Alaska earlier this year. The Kremlin says that the new US strategy accords largely with Russia's view. The United States national security strategy described Trump's vision as one of flexible realism and argued that the United States should revive the 19th century Monroe Doctrine, which declared the Western Hemisphere to be Washington's zone of influence. The strategy signed by Trump also warned that Europe faces civilization erasure and that it was a core US interest to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. Okay, we move on to our next story. And the United States Under Secretary of State for Political Affairs, Alison Hooker, is visiting India from today to December the 11th. Her trip will focus on strengthening the US-India strategic partnership, boosting trade and expanding cooperation in emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence and space exploration. In New Delhi, Hooker will meet senior officials, including Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, to discuss regional security, economic ties and shared priorities in the Indo-Pacific. In Bengaluru, she will visit the Indian Space Research Organisation and meet leaders in space, energy and technology sectors to promote joint research and innovation. The visit is part of advancing US President Donald Trump's vision for a strong partnership with India and a free and open Indo-Pacific. We're now joined by Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee. She is a former Indian ambassador and she joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ambassador Mukherjee, for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you. How would you define India-US relations in an incredibly complicated Trump administration where things seem to be flip-flapping rather frequently among different areas? Of course, we're following a Modi meeting with Vladimir Putin and, of course, huge sanctions, tariffs on India by Donald Trump after the purchase of Russian oil. What do you think this trip is going to turn out like?
Good to be on your show. I'd first begin by saying that this trip is very important precisely because of what you've stated, that it comes just after Vladimir Putin's very successful visit to India. And it demonstrates that India has, despite all challenges, maintained its strategic partnership with the United States. India and the US have shared strategic priorities, and after a long time, there is going to be a high-level discussion on the Indo-Pacific, which means the Quad, because we're also going to be hosting at some point the Quad Summit. And for the past few months, there hasn't been much discussion either of the Quad or the Indo-Pacific, which was not the case under the Biden administration. Therefore, Ms. Alison Hooker's visit and the Foreign Office consultations with Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri will hopefully set that balance, reset the balance, and hopefully there would be some discussions with regard to the Quad Summit. Is President Trump going to be coming for it? What are the likely dates? What is the agenda, etc.? Because there has been increased military activity by China in the Indo-Pacific, which is a shared preoccupation of United States and India. Her trip to Bengaluru and on space again is very important because India relies heavily on US technology and support for our own dynamic space program. And this is something, these are areas which are not affected by any ups and downs on other issues which came in after President Trump's second term. Those were with regard to Russian oil and our strong pushback saying we didn't create the conflict, nor do we have any influence with the Russians on how they conduct their conflict. But yes, we are sensitive to your concerns, and yes, we are ready to buy more oil and natural gas from the Americans. And certainly, we will not do anything that could attract sanctions on us. So these are issues which are being sorted out through a separate dialogue mechanism. The importance of Ms. Hooker's visit is precisely what you've outlined, which is that the agendas which she's going to be discussing, be it Indo-Pacific, be it Quad, or be it the trip to Bengaluru, all indicates a desire on both sides to reset the partnership and take it forward. That is good news for
Yes.
for all of us, and hopefully, Thomas, it will result in a ultimate reduction of those penal tariffs on India, which honestly I don't think we deserved at all. But anyway, we got in the way of a messy misunderstanding, which I think is now being sorted out. Thomas.
And Ambassador, just briefly, what would be the ideal outcome for both sides? Of course, understanding that the restrictions, the tariffs, the relationships that both sides hold still remain in place. What would be the most likely or the most hopeful positive outcome that we could get here from Alison Hooker's visit by the end of it to both New Delhi and Bangalore?
Well, frankly, Thomas, the free trade agreement is ready. Actually, it had been ready from both sides more than a month ago, but for certain reasons, it was held up for final approval by the President of the United States. That agreement is ready to be signed. The dates of the Quad Summit have been suggested. We are awaiting a final decision on the part of President Trump, depending on his program. It would be an important visit, a bilateral visit. His earlier visit, if you would recall, in his first term was a huge success, as was indeed the visit of J.D. Vance, his vice president, which was it almost became like a presidential visit. It was so enthusiastically greeted by every section of Indian society. So I think that this would result in a forward movement, and there are very positive signals now coming from Washington that they are now looking to reset the ties. And in any case, there have also been signals coming that now the Trump administration looks at India as a very important interlocutor on the whole Russia-Ukraine issue. We are looking at dates of Zelensky's visit to India after Putin. These are all very positive signals.
Yes.
In our past, the Americans have understood that India, with its 1.4 billion people and its fast-growing economy and its extremely friendly approach towards the United States, as with Russia, is a very important partner in President Trump's desire to bring an end to the conflict, to bring peace to Europe, so that the economy, the global economy, can move forward. And in that, we are very happy to be a partner with the United States in whatever way the US would like us to partner them with.
Yes, Ambassador Mukherjee, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. We now move on over to the Caribbean, and US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth says that he would have made the same call in ordering a controversial follow-up strike on a suspected drug boat in the Caribbean that killed survivors. Hegseth made these comments while speaking to a defense industry forum and reiterated his claim that he was not present for the duration of the military operation. Hegseth denied that he had given an initial order to kill everyone on board and said that a decision had not yet been made on whether to release the full tape of the strike. Hegseth also noted that the US will resume nuclear weapons testing and modernize its nuclear triad on an equal basis as others, alluding to other nuclear powers like Russia and China. Now joining us Okay. US Secretary of State or War, whatever you'd like to call him, Pete Hegseth, says that he would have made the same call in regards to this controversial follow-up strike on this suspected drug boat in the Caribbean that killed survivors, allegedly a double tap attack. Okay, let's give you some of the statements from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth.
There was protocol for dealing with survivors, but in that, and frankly, there was 10 strikes later, there was a semi-submersible that I think folks here, meaning a submarine. You don't go fishing on a submarine full of drugs. And in that particular case, the first strike didn't take it out. A couple guys jumped off and swam, from what I understand, a ways away. When we struck the submarine a second time, it sunk, and then you had two people that you had to go get, and we had the ability to go get them. We gave them back to their host countries. That's a story that's already been out in the public. So we didn't change our protocol. It was just a different circumstance.
Okay, we're now joined by Major General Sudhakar Ji. He's an international relations and defence expert. He joins us live from the Indian capital of New Delhi. Major General Ji, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, nearly 80 people, or over 80 people actually, being killed now by these strikes, over 20 of which have been extremely controversial. What are your thoughts on how the Defence Secretary has said that he doesn't know whether he's going to release the tape, and also the fact that he said that he would make the same call in ordering this follow-up strike, which killed two survivors on this suspected drug boat, but claimed that he wasn't in the room during the operation?
Good evening, Thomas. Thank you for inviting me once again for your show. And thank you once again, you considering me as competent enough to respond to an issue as sensitive as this. In my opinion, Pete Hegseth should be sacked. Should be sacked. He should be removed from his appointment. In any kind of conflict, in no naval warfare, if two men are clinging on for life after the asset or the platform has been damaged, he has got no business. He's heading towards his self-destruction, disaster like Donald Trump. I'm glad in your previous show, I'm very happy and compliment you and NewsX World and similar kind of platforms because of you people. And I would say mainstream media, international and national, the USA has taken a turnaround. They have realized we don't want to lose a superpower like USA. We want them to remain in the mainstream. So same goes here. There is a rule of law. There is a rules of engagement. In a case like this, it simply cannot happen. This man doesn't know the rules of engagement. This has to be spoken out loudly and has to be called out. I'm sorry, you have given me an opportunity to bell the cat. And even if I have to stick my neck out, take this as sticking my neck out, he is actually damaging himself and USA and the historical legacy of epitome of rules-based international order. The same country has laid the rules-based international order. If at all there is a naval law, in times of conflict, it is this country which is laid out. He is violating, he is conflicting the rules which has been evolved over the years by his own country. Tell him, give him some time to go through the Constitution of USA. You will come across. You cannot hit such kind of people who, this is a very blatant human rights violation. I don't know why Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, they haven't woken up till now. That's it, and back to you, please.
Yeah, just very briefly, what do you think of the theatrics of it all? Of course, there has been visuals released on social media of these strikes happening. These visuals, we don't know if they're going to be released or not. However, unapologetically, visuals of these boat strikes of suspected, reiterate, suspected drug vessels are released on social media. What are your thoughts on the method there?
Thomas, I'm a retired general. I don't want to get into any controversy, but let me tell you the fact. You have stopped at a figure of 80, I think. There are 87 people who have been killed. 87 people, I think a large number of boats in international waters which have been actually hit and neutralized. Has anybody in the world, including media, has anyone asked the USA where is the evidence? St. Pitt Hegseth day before yesterday he was giving a statement and it was played by NewsX World or some internet, maybe Egyptian channel or Russian channel, and they reproduced. He was saying alleged, alleged. He was making use of the adjectives. There is no convincing evidence of these people. Why isn't the world order asking for the evidence? What makes you hit these people in the international waters? That is what my point is. Unfortunately, to answer your question in a very brief and concise manner, he is towing the line of Donald Trump for his survival. This man doesn't have courage of conviction. He needs to have a courage of conviction to survive as a human being, then as a leader, then as a minister or a secretary of a superpower like USA.
Yes, Major General Sudhakaji, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you here on the programme. Well, we now finish with our final story, and we move south. And Honduras's presidential race remains too close to call as voting counting enters its 7th day, with 88% of the ballots tallied. Conservative candidate Nasri Asfura, backed by US President Donald Trump, holds a razor-thin lead over centrist rival Salvador Nasrallah. Asfura has 40.19% of votes, about 20,000 ahead of Nasrallah at 39.49%. Leftist Rixi Moncada trials win in third with 19.3%. Election officials are reviewing 14% of ballots showing inconsistencies. The ruling Libre Party has called for a nationwide recount. Trump's endorsement of Asfura and his recent pardon of former President Juan Orlando Hernandez have drawn international attention. The streets of Tegucigalpa remain calm as workers continue hand-counting votes. And that's all that we have time for on America 360 this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.